Yeah, hello everyone and a very warm welcome at Pakhuis de Zwijger. So nice that you're all here. Are you looking forward? Are you looking forward? All right, I am. Also, the people who are watching us from home, a very warm welcome. I see some people looking behind the cameras there. People are tuning in from all over the Netherlands. Very warm welcome. Nice that you are here. In a world powered by big data and AI, questions arise about equity, fairness, human rights, and many more. And that's why Pakhuis de Zwijger has launched a new series called Designing Technology for All. Last month, we had our first session. It was about bias in data. And today we're going to talk about structures and power and accountability in AI and data. The last session is on the 14th of April, and then we're going to zoom in on shaping the future of AI together. It will be an interactive session today, so if you see a Mentimeter code coming up on the screen, please use your phone, or if you don't have a phone with you, use the phone of one of the neighbors. Speaking about neighbors, if we want to shape the future of AI together, we have to get to know people who are also into the topic. So I would like to take 1 minute, shake each other's hands, like, hey, how are you? Introduce yourself a little while. I'm Arike. Hello. Go to the left, go to the right. Hi. I'm Arike. Nice to meet you. Yeah, that's how we do it. In the panel. Hi. Hi. Yes, stop the time. Stop the time. Yeah, it's really important that you get to know each other within the industry. And for the people who are watching us from home, next time if you're here, you can also meet new people. It's really important because you have to shape the future of technology together. And we can only shape the future if we know each other. So please feel free also afterwards to meet each other at the bar and to speak about what you heard. What did inspire you, or what questions do you still have? Today we're going to talk about the power structures and accountability in data. And I'm not going to do that alone. I'm going to do that with our panel. Let me quickly introduce them to you. On my right, there is Alexander Laufer, researcher and policy officer on tech and discrimination at Amnesty International. Can I have an applause for Alexander? Nice that you're here.
Thanks.
It's working. Perfect. Perfect. To the right, or for the audience to the left, is Bertie Banner, staff member policy and research at Bureau Clara Wigman. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here.
We too. Thanks for coming. And then to the left, Bertie Banner, staff member policy and... then to the left, Daniel Muge, professor of political arithmetic at the political science department of the UvA. Yeah. Welcome. Applaus.
Yeah. Dankjewel.
Yeah, before I will tell you more of our panel, I would like to introduce you to our partner. The first 3 sessions we organize here at Pakhuis de Zwijger are in collaboration with FemData. Please come to our stage. And applause for Mirte and Paulina. Welcome. Can you quickly introduce yourself and why you started FemData?
I'm Mirte. I'm a PhD student in the marketing department at the University of Amsterdam.
Hi everyone, I'm Paulina and I'm a PhD student at the Business Analytics department at the UvA, and I'm doing research on prediction models.
Yeah.
And we started FemData out of a lot of frustration, but also to channel that frustration into something productive. With our initiative for trying to raise more awareness for data bias from an intersectional feminist perspective. We do that by hosting talks like today, panel talks, but we also give talks ourselves or workshops. And our goal is really to invite people from all different kinds of disciplines and expertise. So hopefully we can get some discussion going today also. I mean, there are so many different opinions, and I think it's important that we hear them all. Yeah, and we are very lucky to be able to do this because we got a grant. So thank you to the UvA for sponsoring this, and also for Pakhuis de Zwijger for doing this with us. We're really excited to be here.
Yeah. We all are. Last time there was a good question from the audience, and she asked you, is it a feminist perspective?
I would say so. I think feminism is a lot broader than just gender. I think this was the question that we had last time. maybe our talks are not always only centered on gender, but gender is intersectional. All of these issues are intersectional, so we try to highlight all of these aspects, not just only gender.
Yeah. And for the ones who missed the first session, can you summarize real quick what the first session was about? It was 1 month ago.
Yeah, so in the first session, we looked into the question of, okay, what does data bias even mean? And the interesting thing that I always notice about this question is that if you ask 5 different people from 5 different disciplines, then you'll notice that usually you'll get 5 slightly different answers to the topic. So that's something that we really try to highlight in this first session. So the fact that this is a really multidisciplinary issue and also obviously coupled up with some practical examples. So for instance, we had somebody talk about medical app development and how vulnerable communities are often excluded from the development of those applications. We also talked about large language models and how the fact that these tend to be very, very Anglocentric, how that can trickle down to have negative effect on already marginalized communities. And I would say that the general consensus in this entire session was that, well, first of all, there's no such thing as unbiased data because of the social context that it arises in, but also that because it's such a multifaceted issue that you really have to monitor this process at every stage of the data pipeline instead of just looking at the end result and then trying to figure out, oh, let's compute some fairness metrics and see how this compares across groups. It's just not enough.
Yeah. And if you're listening and thinking, oh, that's a pity, I missed that, it's still online, so you can watch it back. That's the good news. Last question. Today is about power, data, and algorithms. Why is it so important to investigate power and dynamics in relation to data?
So we became really interested in this topic because we think that the whole topic of, okay, us using technology in our daily lives so much doesn't exist in this kind of political vacuum because there's always different actors like companies and governments and so on that actively shape, first of all, what technology we use, but also the way in which we can use it. So that's essentially the topic that we're interested in for tonight. So we're going to dive in a little bit more into the politics of technology, but also what organizations are taking part and what legal frameworks already exist that are aimed at tackling this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We will hear more from you tonight because in between the meetings you will come up to stage and then we have a talk about what's going on here. But for now, applause for FemData. Thank you. Yeah, we will immediately dive into our panel. Let me introduce you to them a little bit more bigger. Bertie, I will start with you. You're the staff member of research and policy at Bureau Clara Wigman. What is the main goal of Clara Wigman?
Yes, so Bureau Clara Wigman is a legal organization that is dedicated to promoting intersectional gender equality. And we are existing for over 40 years already. And we mostly work through legal action. So we use the law as an instrument to better the position of women, and I say this in a broadly sense, to better their legal and societal position. So we use the law, and you might know us of our cases, such as the silicone case, which concerns, which is a big class action case concerning victims of silicone breast implants. And it's a big case that we're filing against a pharmaceutical producer. Or you might know us from our equal pay case concerning female judiciary. So we work on themes such as economic justice or reproductive rights, and now also more on themes such as gender and technology. Themes such as algorithmic discrimination or online gendered abuse, such as hate speech, or themes such as data protection and privacy in femtech. So yeah, we work really hard we strive really hard to a society that's equal and just for everyone.
Yeah, and you focus on policy and research. Can you tell a little bit more about how that looks like in daily life? What do you focus on?
So a daily life is really difficult to say because every day is just very different. Actually, I work on several topics. So I work on work and income, but I also work on gender and tech. And gender and tech is in the broader sense. So we have, for instance, our strategic litigations that we do which involves a lot of lawyers, a lot of stakeholders, or we have advocacy, what we do, which also involves talking to a lot of politicians or lawmakers. We work closely with similar organizations that do strategic litigation or do research on tech or in a more broadened sense on gender. So yeah, a day in my life is never the same. And we're a really small organization. We work really hard. Right now we're with 14 staff members. And unfortunately, the issues are really big. So every day is just a very different day for us.
Yeah, small team, big impact. Maybe you opened the news a few months ago and you read something about the case against Meta. We will talk about that a little bit later on, so it's a cliffhanger, but it's really interesting and I think it's really impactful what you do with such a small team. On the left of you there's Daniel, professor at political arithmetic at the Political Science Department of the UvA. How do I pronounce it and what is it? Political arithmetic. I never heard of that.
So it's supposed to be political arithmetic, I hope. Now, what is that? I came to this whole topic as somebody who studied the political underbelly of numbers. So back in the 17th century, there was a guy who said, well, what you, the kings out there, have to do is to dominate populations by using statistics. You understand them better through statistics, and then you can dominate them more effectively. And he peddled this. He was like a consultant, in a way, to the English crown at the time. And he sold this whole approach to governing as political arithmetic. That's what he called it. Now, that whole label has since been completely forgotten. Nobody talks about political arithmetic anymore. But of course, fact of the matter is that governing through spreadsheets is absolutely the order of the day. That's how modern government functions, that they use numbers to understand what we are, what we do, what we need or don't need. And of course, we feel, and I think as Mirte and Paulina just outlined, there are many pitfalls hidden in that kind of way of seeing populations, of administering, controlling, and governing populations. And so what I do in my work, and that's where this title comes from, is understanding ruling through spreadsheets and now ruling through algorithms as a mode of governance from a critical perspective.
Yeah, and there's another word you have to help me with how to pronounce it. You're leading the Realgulate project. What is the project about?
So indeed, that's a little bit like, that's my fault, because like we chose a really hard to pronounce name that's supposed to be regulate, and the A is supposed to be an AI in there. So that's a research project that's funded by the Dutch Science Council, NWO, and it's a project that tries to understand the European governance of artificial intelligence. So what the folks in Brussels do to, at least that's what we would like to see, to steer AI and AI in our lives in the right direction. And so we're with a team of maybe half a dozen people there, which I lead. And what we do is we investigate what are the rules, who makes them, why, but also what's the bigger both economic and political force field globally in which that plays out. Because the EU maybe has high ambitions, could be higher for me still, but okay, it's better than what most of the others do. But of course, the real big kids on the AI playground are not the Europeans, but that's the United States, American companies, Chinese companies. So how that all pans out is what we investigate.
Yeah, yeah. And then last but not least, you're also the co-initiator of the Citizen Society, an AI research platform. Why did you start this platform?
So the thing is that a topic like AI needs to be, I think, seen from very different angles at the same time. So it's not something that only legal people or only technical people or only philosophers or political scientists or sociologists should investigate. But I think to understand how that kind of a technology functions in society, you need all these perspectives at the same time. And so within our faculty, we set up a research center that actually tries to bridge across these different things and bring people together who have these different perspectives, because obviously no one can know it all, no one has all the relevant expertise, and so it's in the exchange with other people who look at similar topics but from different angles that you can collectively start to build better, stronger, more resilient perspectives.
Yeah. Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Alexander, you're a research and policy officer on technology and discrimination at Amnesty International, and you worked on discriminatory risk profiling and also racial profiling. Can you tell me more about your work at Amnesty International?
Yeah, so Amnesty is a worldwide organization. Just a few words of introduction. With over 10 million members and supporters in the Netherlands, it's over 450,000, I think. And it's most well known for the work on political prisoners, human rights defenders who are jailed. We have these big campaigns to free people of political prison. But we also do a lot of advocacy work on many themes, racial justice and gender, refugee rights, children rights, and specifically I work on racial justice and discrimination, and through the use of technology. So the last years we've seen a growing trend of governments deploying discriminatory technology within the social protection domain. So of course that's not the goal governments have. They implement this technology to try to make things more efficient, but we see that there is a very high risk of discrimination when you use technology in the social protection domain or in the policing domain. And it's very much about predictive technology, like what Paulina is working on, and that's also what I focus on. So I do a mix of research and advocacy, talking with politicians, but also with civil servants that develop these systems.
And I can imagine your department is growing because the questions arise at every point in the discussion about big data and AI. With how many people do you work on AI within Amnesty?
So it's me.
Oh, wow.
So I work in a team that focuses on the Netherlands, and it's just me working on profiling and predictive technology. And then we have one person working on surveillance, particularly of activists. And there is, so yeah, Amnesty is a very big organization, so there is also an office in London that is the headquarters, and there is a whole technology division there who work on many different countries, let's say. So I think for a country section, it's quite unique to have an Amnesty person dedicated to working with technology, but it's just one.
Yeah. Let's double that up. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. We will dive into the first part of our panel. There are two parts tonight, and the first part is about who holds the power. There's now a Mentimeter coming up. We can see it in the screen in a few moments. And there will be a code. And the code on the screen is 33242884. So please, if you have a phone, use it or collaborate with the one next to you. For the people online, you can see the code into your screen. And there will be a question popping up. And the question is as follows. Who holds the power over AI development and the use of data today? So if it works correctly, you can log in. Please show your hand if you are already tuned in. Who's already into the program? All right, we will take a few more minutes because not everyone is logged in yet. So it works like this. You go to www.menti.com, and if you go to the website, you can fill in the code. And the code is on the screen. I will repeat the code again because it's a little bit small. 33242884. That's the code. And if you have the code, let me quickly check a little bit at the phones. Some people are using like this protector that you cannot look on it. Yeah, you can see the screen. Yeah, and the question is indeed, who holds the power over AI development and the use of data today? And then your answers anonymously popping up on the screen behind us. Big tech is really big in the middle. So that's already interesting. And I see, again, big tech companies, corporates, developers, governments, Silicon Valley, AI companies in the US, search engines, data monopolies, tech bros, political party, Meta, interesting, we will talk about it later today. OpenAI, well, big tech is still the biggest, so let's start with that. You can complete filling in the words, but we will already discuss it with our panel. If you had to choose to fill in a word, did you choose the same or did you do something else? Daniel?
looks pretty good to me. I mean, it looks pretty bad to me, but it looks like correct bad to me, if that makes sense. I think that's what it is. But I think the one addition maybe is that this started out as something that was, I think, largely developed by AI companies, so the open AIs of this world. And one of the shifts that I think we've seen is that the more traditional big tech companies have over the past few years effectively gobbled them up and pulled them towards themselves. So what I think used to be a game of AI nerd startup kind of things has ended up in the arms of Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft. And so I think I think that's an important thing to realize, that this isn't all cutting edge companies. It used to be them, and now it's the companies that have been dominating the digital space for years that yet again have managed to incorporate this new technological frontier to further solidify their position in our societies and economies.
Yeah, thanks. Bertie and Alexander, do you see a word that surprised you? Or is it also logical for you?
I'm not so surprised.
Maybe who is Alissa, who is Fred, who is Emma? Those are
Which
the only
one?
ones. Yeah, I'm curious to know what kind of power they hold. But other than that, I think it's pretty accurate, yeah, unfortunately.
All right. Let's go to our second question. And that question is on your screen right now, if it's correct. And the question is, seeing more control from governments, corporations, or global power structures. Are we seeing more control from governments, corporations, or global power structures? It's popping up maybe in your screen. Oh, it's a different one. That's nice. Whose responsibility is it to hold discriminatory AI accountable? Google, bam! Yeah, hard one. Policymakers, governments. Oh, I'm super curious. Citizens. Whose responsibility is it? Yeah. What can we do as a citizen? Alexander?
No, I'm very pleased that government is big in the middle of the screen, because that's what our work at Amnesty is all about. Is about, pointing governments to their obligations under human rights law, treaties that were signed and ratified by countries, and so. For example, the Netherlands, under the international human rights law treaties that it ratified, has an obligation to ensure the promotion of racial justice, to promote and protect people against discriminatory outcomes of algorithms. And there is many ways in which this can be implemented, both through laws and effective oversight through agencies. Which is both of these aspects are sometimes lacking, so that's what we try to do.
Yeah, thanks. Bertie, if you look at all those words, what are some thoughts that you have if you see these words on our screen?
I was thinking of civil society as well, but I don't know if it's up there. And also in relation to your question as an individual, what you could do. Well, I think it's very scary as an individual to do something against this big machine of big tech. And that's where I think civil society has a role to represent individuals, those most affected by AI, but also marginalized communities, that civil society is the player that is to represent them and is the voice for these groups. So I would say civil society has a big role in holding them accountable.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for all the answers. I think it's really interesting to see it on the screen. At the end of every block, we have a Q&A with more open questions. So this was the word cloud, but there will be an open questioning as well. So if you have any question during this first block, write them down, and then we will come back to you. Bertie, the Meta case. A few weeks ago, Bureau Clara Wichman, together with Global Witness, won a case against Meta at the Netherlands Institute for Human Rights. We also call it College van de Rechten van de Mens. Can you tell us more about this case?
Yes, gladly. In collaboration with Global Witness, we conducted research into Meta's algorithm for job ads on Facebook. We posted real job ads on Facebook, whilst also making sure that these job ads are gender neutral, in the sense that the text is gender neutral and the images that were used are also gender neutral. And the results showed that that Facebook or Meta's algorithm did not process these job ads gender neutral. So certain jobs were predominantly shown to men and other jobs were predominantly shown to women. For instance, mechanic was mostly shown, I think 96% shown to men, whilst receptionist was 97% shown to women. And this is extremely harmful because it holds inequality on the job market in place, but it also perpetuates stereotypes in what kind of jobs men should do and what kind of jobs women should do. So in response to this, together with Global Witness, we filed a complaint at the Netherlands Institute for Human Rights, and we also submitted a request at request for enforcement at the Dutch Data Protection Authority. Fortunately for us, a few weeks ago, we won the case in which the institute stated that Meta has a responsibility to make sure that their algorithm does not have a discriminatory effect. So they have a responsibility, they have a duty of care to make sure that their algorithms, at least when it comes to job ads, do not discriminate. And it was very interesting because Meta argued that, you know, we have this algorithm and it's based on a machine learning model, and it's evaluating, and it constantly evolves itself, and its aim is to make sure that the users see ads that they're most likely to interact with. And the institute rejected this reasoning and said, no, still as a tech company, you have a responsibility in making sure that at least the outcome is not discriminatory and that it does not perpetuate stereotypes. So we're very happy with this, and it feels like a major kickback to big tech as well, especially looking at I think everyone knows what has been happening recently in the US and everything, and also Meta changing their policies when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and also when it comes to the threshold that they have lowered when it comes to hate speech. So we're very happy with this outcome. And
did you expect this outcome?
I think the right answer would be yes, but I won't. I was a bit nervous because of everything that has been happening quite recently, and especially at the start of the year, it felt like big tech was winning. Yeah, it could go either way, but we're very happy with the outcome. And also, maybe what's interesting to know is that the Institute, this is one of the first rulings that concerns algorithmic discrimination by the Institute. So we're very happy that the Institute could make such a big statement in stating that, you know, tech companies have a responsibility in this as well. So yeah.
As I said, small team, big impact, can have a big applause. I think it's really impressive. Thank you. Yeah. There was another case in the news. It was about Duo and students. Who saw something about that online? Can I see some hands? A few. Small hands.
That's great.
Yeah, there was a case about a Duo case about ethnic profiling, and you worked on that for Amnesty International. Oh, we see it on the back. It's called Profiled Without Protection. You also have copies with you, so if you want to read the research, it's available, and you can also check it out online. It's available for free. You can download it. And Alexander, I was really curious. Can you tell us more about the report that you worked on?
Yes, so the report analyzes the use of a risk profiling algorithm by DUO, which is a governmental organization in the Netherlands that is responsible for distributing welfare benefits to students. So every student in the Netherlands is entitled to welfare benefits, and these benefits are higher if you are not living at home with your parents anymore. And unfortunately, DUO is also tasked with making sure that people are not frauding the system. And this, so DUO back in 2009, 10, 11, and 12 basically designed this algorithm. To select students for unannounced house visits. So basically what DUO would do is get a list of students that were supposed to be high risk, and then send inspectors to their homes to check if they were actually living there, because they suspected people of saying they were not living with their parents anymore, and then getting more money. The problem with this algorithm is that they used 3 criteria that were discriminating people based on their race and social economic background. And recently this whole case came to the news, and the Dutch government apologized for this and acknowledged that there was indirect discrimination. And for us, this was really illustrative of how the Dutch governmental organizations continue to use risk profiling algorithms despite many, many scandals that we have seen in the past few years. And organizations continue to use these systems despite evidence of discrimination and without using enough human rights safeguards. And also the government fails to protect people against discriminatory algorithms.
Yeah, that's super scary. What were the recommendations from Amnesty International for the DUO case, and how did the Dutch government respond on that?
So the Dutch government, one of our main critiques is that the Dutch government basically fails to correctly apply human rights law to algorithmic discrimination cases. So there has been a lot of work by the government to try to avoid discrimination by algorithms, but every time they don't really follow the case law applied by the courts and don't explain norms how they should be explained in line with the court. So our recommendations are partly related to that, so telling the Dutch government to apply mandatory and binding human rights assessments of these systems before they are deployed, but also after they are deployed. Other recommendations are about basically prohibit the use of these systems in the social protection domain unless the government can make sure and guarantee that people are not being discriminated against. And this can be a whole range of measures from mandatory transparency, accountability mechanism, effective oversight, and consultations with key stakeholders, but also impacted communities. So in this case, students with migration backgrounds, Muslim students, etc.
What's the timeline? Is the project closed now because the government said some apologies? The research is online now, or does it still continue?
So the government stopped the use of the system and took first steps to acknowledge that there was discrimination and also to compensate students for it, which is a positive beginning, but they still have not acknowledged that discrimination was not only on the base of migration background, but also on the base of social and economic situation. And it's actually first also in terms of European cases of algorithmic discrimination. So we also recommend the government to acknowledge that people were discriminated based on their social and economic background. And of course, we know that this often intersects with race and also gender, so talking about intersectional discrimination. Yeah.
It's a super interesting research. If you want to read it or look it up, it's free available online as a PDF. And you also
I brought a few
copy.
copies that are over there. So.
Thank you so much. Daniel, you already explained a bit about the project Regulalte. It looks at global AI regulation. I was wondering, can the EU effectively regulate tech giants like Meta, Google and Amazon?
No. That's I guess, the simple answer now. For a very long time, Brussels had an image of itself that while the big companies came from other countries, the one magic weapon that it had was that it was a regulatory superpower, that our rules were stronger, they were better intentioned. And so basically, by having strong and smart rules, we could basically still get what we want. And I think, Bertie, already recently, you just mentioned that the global political climate has really changed again during this past year, and I think people are waking up to the fact that well-intentioned rules are not enough.
Is this the spirit now? Beat algorithm?
I think the spirit now is beat American big tech. I was in Brussels just last week speaking to a lot of people from the European Parliament, from the Commission, and the mood has really shifted in the direction of we have discovered that we have a fundamental vulnerability in our society, in our politics, as long as all the digital systems, also in this room, these screens, those computers, your smartphones, are run and controlled by foreign tech companies that need not in itself be a weapon that can be used for extortion, but if you have somebody in the White House or elsewhere in power who can arm twist Microsoft into no longer rolling out security patches onto our Windows computers, then we have a serious problem right there. That's a scenario that maybe a year ago felt pretty outlandish. It doesn't anymore. And that's true across many layers of the digital technology stack that we use. And so the mood has shifted in the direction we need, at least at critical junctures, our own digital infrastructure, and that includes hardware, so our ability to make our own computer chips, but it also includes software, it also includes social media platforms and these sorts of things. So I think there is a movement right now that says, can we claim back control? Whether that works, of course, is a complicated question, because it's not something that you can do at the push of a button.
Yeah. And how much influence should the US have in shaping European AI policy?
Well, certainly under the current president, none, ideally. No, I think it's pretty clear that the vision there is fundamentally different than, I guess, what many people here have. And it's true on several levels. I think it's true on the very specific level. So things were mentioned already about the safeguards that these systems have built in, for example, to safeguard protected characteristics of people, individual data, but also that they don't generate misogynistic, racist, and other kinds of hateful content on that level. But I think there's also another level that we don't talk enough about yet. These are technologies that are really entering into the fundamental tissue of our society on so many levels, and right now they're being developed in the name of making money with them. And that such a transformative set of technologies is developed and rolled out on the basis of a few people being able to get rich on their back, that's completely inappropriate. In the United States, right now, that's accepted as that's just how we do it. That is not a model that we should follow. And so far, we've been like one of these frogs that are slowly boiling in that cup of water and never manages to jump out. I think it's at the 11th hour, now we should jump out, because I think we need a fundamental shift in direction to reclaim control over these technologies, to make sure that they serve the kind of human flourishing and society that we want, rather than what happens in the wallets of a few rich people.
Yeah. While we were having dinner with the speakers before this talk, you and Bertie also made a statement which I really locked up in my head. And you said, if you download an app and it's for free, then you must not think, oh, that's nice of them, it's for free. But you have to think about who pays the price. And yeah, maybe you can end the statement that you made, but it was something like that, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I think indeed, like That is the essence. That we were specifically talking about femtech. So I don't know, some people in the room may use flow, for example, or other kinds of, but that's of course true for all sorts of different kinds of applications. And I think that specific example, and you pointed to that, that when we get digital stuff for free, we think that somebody's being nice to us. I at least have that all the time. I go like, okay, cool. Whether that's your for free Spotify account or any app that you download or whatnot, it's not for free. People are not giving us these things because they want to do us a favor. There is a business model, and the fact that we're not aware of that is a strong pointer that there is something going on that we don't understand, but where we're part of the product. So any messaging app that you get for free, it's not for free. There's a business model there somewhere. Somebody's making money with this. And I think that's, so when we talked about citizens, for example, right, that is something where we could collectively try to help each other, encourage each other to develop a more critical mindset, to take a hard look again at what exactly is happening on our phones and in our lives.
Alexander, you want to respond?
I just wanted to say, accept Signal. Use Signal.
Yeah. Who's already using Signal? Can I see some hands? I think 70%. Yeah, that's a lot. Bertie, to what extent should Europe align with AI standards from the United States, or is an independent approach maybe more beneficial?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you just said, and also about, that the alliance between big tech and Trump is really concerning, because big tech, on the other hand, is getting more protection, less regulation, whilst the Trump administration is getting more influence and more power. I think we've seen it during the US elections already, in Germany as well, which is a bit closer to home. So it's really concerning, and more in relation to gender equality and digital rights, for instance. You already mentioned the business model. You can see it on social media, for instance, as well. They profile themselves. Their business model is tied to, engagement. The more people that are joining the platform, the more it becomes interesting and valuable for users and for advertisers. So they have to maintain engagement as much as possible. And how do they do that? They advertise themselves to be free, to be open, to be champions of free speech. And underlining to that free speech, you see that it becomes this platform where also harmful content is pushed. So, for instance, hate speech is allowed, or the spread of misinformation is allowed. So it's really concerning. So, in my opinion, should we align with the US? No, definitely not. But in the same breath, I also want to say that I hope that because we're making all these laws and everything on EU level, I do hope that these EU bodies stand firm and do not bow down to what is happening in the US. I know there are fears of political tensions or fears of retaliation or whatsoever, but I think now is the time, really the time to stand firm and really enforce what they've made. So
Yeah, thanks. Also, really interesting to hear your experiences while researching for Meta, for the case. Alexander, how can governments be held accountable for their use of data and algorithms?
So I think it's important that we tell governments about their obligations under international human rights law, that we tell governments they have a duty to protect citizens against discriminations, to implement laws and policies that will prevent governmental agencies from using algorithms that end up discriminating people. States have a duty to mandate, to give a strong mandate to oversight authorities so that they are able to enforce these laws, and this is true at the Dutch but also at the European level. So now we have the laws, we have an AI Act that is going into effect, and now indeed we need the oversight authorities to stand firm and punish Meta or Twitter and to stop the spread of misinformation or whatnot. Yeah.
But especially in the Duo case, how did Duo fail to investigate signs of discrimination and what lesson can be learned?
Yeah, so in the Duo case, I mean, basically everything that could go wrong went wrong in the Duo case. So Duo did not basically substantiate the reasons why they built the system the way they built it. And they did not assess beforehand what the negative impact on human rights would be. Sorry, small blackout.
Yeah, but and everything else is you can read in the research paper. But there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah,
about
so
the Duo
basically,
case, so
they didn't substantiate why they built the system the way they did, but also they were not open about that this system was being used. It was not clear who was responsible for the use of this system. People couldn't appeal to decisions taken by the system. So basically the whole set of usual human rights safeguards to protect people from discrimination was not there.
yeah, and there are institutions that can help us with protection and prevent such issues. I heard about CERT and also ICESCR. Bertie, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights and on the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And I would also like to add the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women as well, the CEDAW. And these are all like human rights treaties, you mentioned it already, that sets guidelines onto how governments should respect and protect human rights, but it also sets guidelines onto how equality and fairness should be ensured in, for instance, algorithmic decision making. So yeah, we already have like great instruments that governments at least could use to make sure that discrimination is not happening.
Thanks. I can imagine you have questions about this or maybe about some other parts from this first part of our panel. This is the moment to ask your questions. So please open Menti code and then you can log in. Or do we with the audience? Do we do with the microphone? Oh, perfect. So we use the microphone for you. And if you're watching from home, then you can use the Menti code. And the code will be online in your screen. And I will get your questions here on my iPad. So we will give you a minute to type some questions down. Before we do that, are there any questions in the room? I see a finger there. Maybe we can walk towards them.
Yes, I have a question because I'm an older woman, and my question is the Duo and the ads for jobs. It's not necessary for me because I'm a pensionado now. So I want to know which human rights law I could use the best.
So also old people are entitled to certain rights, including the right not to be discriminated against. Maybe you receive an allowance or a subsidy or a pension, and probably the state is also trying to make sure that you are not frauding this pension. So the mechanisms are all the same. You are entitled to know if the government is using an algorithm to detect fraud on pension subsidies, and you could also appeal decisions. In case you are controlled by a governmental agency, you should be able to appeal that decision.
I think there's also an additional aspect. Alexander already mentioned the European AI Act, so the AI law that we have, that also, for example, says that companies are not allowed to use technologies that try to exploit people specifically because they might have certain characteristics. So that also means that companies, for example, that would try to target you specifically because they have profiled and figured out that you have certain tastes, that you're in a certain age group and have, you know, certain things, and that could be commercially exploited for them by bombarding you with misleading emails about all sorts of offers or what. So it's not only about what governments can or cannot do, it's also about, and maybe in particular, people who didn't grow up with a smartphone glued to their hand, and maybe slightly less versatile with digital. I also fall into that category. But also, they are supposed to be protected against exploitation by third others. I think that's also an important aspect that's out there.
Thanks. Does it give an answer to your question? Yes. Perfect. I promised the mic also to her, because she was raising her hand as well. What's your name and what's your question?
Thank you. My name is Jonne, and thank you all so much. This has been really, really interesting. So my question is about the sentence reclaim your technology, or reclaim the technology, but in principle anyone who feels like they want to answer. So I would really like to hear a little bit more about how you see this practically. The AI Act is one example, but also the AI Act has been incredibly lobbied down by the tech industry itself. So one could say that to some extent the people that have to become regulated are now regulating themselves, at least to some extent. After the Paris AI Summit, the EU, the UK and the US were like, no, we're not signing this. And then, okay, no, we're not going to do the liability IA directive. We don't want to upset you in any way. So what grounds really does regulation have still in the EU?
Yes, thanks for the question.
So just to try to answer briefly, I think that it's really important that we point states to the fact that they have certain obligations under international human rights law because of the treaty that they already signed and that are already in force. So regardless of what the European law on AI mandates, you and I and you are entitled to the right not to be discriminated against. We have a right to privacy and to peaceful assembly, and that obligation stays regardless of new specific laws on AI or other technology. Maybe.
Yes, I'm very happy that you mentioned it. That the AI Act, it's a promising idea, or the idea of regulating AI is very promising, but unfortunately, it has been extremely weakened by big tech. And herein, I want to re-emphasize that, I think civil society and more importantly, strategic litigation can be really important in making sure that these regulations are interpreted in a way that reflects the voice of those affected by it mostly. And also, I think also in shaping, because you have these institutions now coming with guidelines and everything, but I also think it's up to civil society to contribute to shaping what the meaning is of all these regulations. I don't know if you've read the AI Act, but I've tried it once. It's so complicated. I don't understand what it says, but I think in this strategic litigation and building jurisprudence can help fill these gaps, hopefully, that big tech try to negotiate out of them.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Many more to discuss. Well, maybe meet each other at the bar later tonight. There's time for one more question. I will choose to do it online because we also have many people watching us from online. And the question is, how can risk analysis be non-discriminatory?
Sorry, one more time?
How can risk analysis be non-discriminatory?
So with risk profiling, there is always an inherent risk to discriminatory outcomes. So that's why we actually recommend to states that they avoid using these systems in areas where there is a high risk of human rights violation. There is a certain number of things that you can do to try to minimize the risk of harm, but it's never zero, unfortunately. And also there is quite a lack of evidence that these systems are actually useful at all. So that kind of reinforces our call.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I can imagine there are still many more questions. Please save them for later on because we have another Mentimeter coming up. For now, we will dive into the... Yeah, thanks. Applause, by the way, for our great team. Thank you so much for giving us the mic. The second part of our panel will zoom in about what are ways that contest our power and civic participation. A question for the three of you. What should be the public sector's responsibility and what should fall to the private sector?
If I think of the Dutch public authorities first, so I'm still thinking in terms of we need to get control of the technology itself back. That's, I think, is the baseline. And in order to do that, that means several things. It means using public procurement policy, openbare aanbesteding, to systematically prefer built-in-Europe tech, because the domination of the large tech, American mostly, but also Chinese large tech companies that we see right now, that's not a coincidence, that's part of the business model. I mean, hat tip to them, well done, like they played their cards extremely well. But that means if you want to get Windows off our computers, if you want to get people off Instagram and towards something else, and that needs a little bit of arm twisting. That's not going to happen by itself. And so that needs public support. And so I think governments need to get together and do several things. Use public procurement to at least use the money that they spend themselves on systems that are in line with what they want, and not just say, oh, Microsoft, play by our rules. Nothing against Microsoft, but actually say, no, we use our own companies. The second thing is that they should actually systematically and strategically support homegrown companies and also protect them, allow them to flourish, where that's necessary in order for them to grow. And then I think also collectively encourage European citizens and European companies and help them make that switch. It's completely crazy to me that there isn't a stronger concerted push in this country indeed to get people onto Signal, for example, right? That was mentioned already. There was sort of like a Signal Day on the 1st of March. Roosje Klap, some of you may be familiar with her, runs Noorderlicht in Groningen. She's part of the Make the Social Social Again campaign, for example. Great work. But the reach of these sorts of things still seems limited. If we're generally so concerned about the domination of US big tech companies, why don't we have a Dutch government that maybe doesn't say, okay, everybody go use Signal, but we want to make sure that everybody has choice on their telephone. So here's an idea. Why don't you download that program, right? These things need a little bit of help, and governments are not taking their responsibility.
Yeah, thanks. Bert and Alexander, can you give examples for the private sector? What can they do?
Well, actually, I focus exclusively on profiling by governments, so that's a bit hard. But I would say, that just as with the regulation of any product produced by a private company, like we wouldn't allow companies to sell cars that sometimes explode, and they have a higher chance of exploding when it's a black woman driving it. So I would say that there should be strict rules about technology too, and they should be enforced, and we should not allow companies to sell products that can be dangerous to people.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes, and I think in addition to that institutions, the EU bodies, they have a big role in making it harder for these companies to bring out these products and bring out these apps that track you or surveil you or all the other bad things. So fines would be amazing. I think the European Commission already gave a really high fine to X. I think it's something in millions or billions. So and really starting to enforce so that it creates this shockwave effect to not only X but all the other big techs. Companies.
Yeah, because of the time, I see you want to respond, but because of the time, we go to the next. But maybe it's a good one for you. Does Europe's focus on tech independence create new opportunities for civil participation and transparency in AI development?
It could. Because I think right now, so as I said, I think there is a strong movement in Brussels to say we want our own European tech, but right now there are two different flavors and still a little bit unclear which one of them will win out. And there's something to be said for both of them. There's one movement in Brussels that says we need the digital equivalent of Airbus, the airplane manufacturer, something like that. So what we need is European big tech. That has to be our answer to American big tech. And if that's the model that wins out, I think that has commercially and also realistically the better chances of success. But of course, that is not something, if you think of the Airbus of the internet, that would be doors wide open to civil society participation. And there is another stream, I think that's also present, but is right now facing an uphill struggle that says, no, we should combine these things. We should switch to something European, and we should switch from something that's dominated by money to something that's dominated by the public interest and bottom-up input. But that's, I think that would be nice right now, like from what I'm hearing and seeing there. I think that's, the chances are not good. And I think what we have to, like, one more thing I think that we really need to understand is that since the last European elections, the power balance in the European Parliament has really shifted to the right. There used to be a situation where, say, for example, the Greens would, as per standard, be part of like the major coalition that would give shape to what happens in Brussels politics. No longer. They're sidelined. The big political deals are not being made with a company like the Greens, and instead center-right, far-right parties are much more prominent. So when it comes to the political climate there, that has shifted and has shifted against the kinds of things that I guess many people here in the room would like to see.
Yeah, and that's really politics. I hear you also say building this for the internet. By building new things, we also need laws. So Bertie, I was wondering, what role should laws play in shaping AI development? If we are building this Airbus for online, what laws do we need?
Yeah, so we already have a lot of laws. We mentioned the AI Act. We have the Digital Services Act, which is a regulation concerning platform regulations. So it concerns the spread of illegal content, such as hate speech or the spread of misinformation. But we also have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is, I think, one of the strictest privacy laws in the world, I think, at least in Europe. And which concerns like privacy matters, the way your data is being processed, and it also states that data should be processed fair, and I think that fair and lawful and transparent. So there are already laws, and I mentioned it before that the European Commission is already enforcing some of these laws as well. So that looks promising, but. The developments in Europe are not that promising at the moment. And again, I think here comes again the responsibility for civil society to help shape what the meaning is of these regulations and strategically litigate and stand up as the voice of those affected by these regulations.
Yeah. If I hear everything that you're saying for the both of the three of you, it doesn't make me really happy for the future. So, as an expert in your field, what gives you hope for the future? Please give us some hope.
I think we still have tools to our disposal. Strategic litigation is one of them. Bureau Clara Wichmann does that. Amnesty does that. But we also can mobilize. I think it's also important that indeed civil society also plays a role in that. So Amnesty, for example, is present next Saturday at the International Day Against Racism and Discrimination. Try to talk to people around you, make people aware of what is happening, and try to strengthen a common movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what makes me hopeful is that, at least in my circle, I can see that much more people are aware, and I think talks like these also show that a lot of people are starting to become more aware of the power of big tech and the potential influence it can have on your daily life. So I think awareness raising, it's being done, but I can see that it's working as well. And yeah, like you said, it starts with awareness and then mobilizing. And hopefully we can all leave here later with the idea that when we come together, we can do something against it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you both work at organizations that make a big impact. And I was also wondering, how can other groups shift the balance to, or shift the balance of power and protect citizens? How can other companies do that as well? Because now we're talking about Amnesty International and about Bureau Clara Wichmann. But what can we learn from organization and from your way of working? You first.
You can support us with a donation.
But is there like an open source tool that we can copy paste from your organizations, or is the way to go to join your organizations?
Like for example, Amnesty organizes a lot of actions and campaigns. So we offer people the possibility of participating in collective action, both through actually physically protesting, like next Saturday on the Dam, or you can sign petitions, and then we bring these petitions to governments to try to show that there is a broad following of people behind us that support our efforts to try to ensure to enforce human rights treaties and such.
Yeah.
Yes, and well, like I said, we mostly focus on strategic litigation, but you can always come to us for free advice when it comes to what are your rights and what you could do. We have, especially for the people living in Amsterdam, we have vrouwenrechtswinkels where you can come for free advice. And I also have to give a shout out to Bits of Freedom as well, which is a really great organization when it comes to all things related to tech. So if there's anything you want to know or any petition you want to sign, go to the website of Bits of Freedom as well. They do amazing work.
Yeah, thanks. And Daniel, as an individual, what can you do? Maybe someone came alone tonight, is really interested in this topic, but he doesn't have a network. What can you do as an individual? How can you make impact? How can you take a stand?
So for me, that happens on different levels. I think one is, and that I think speaks also to what Bertie and Alex already said, is raising our own awareness of and starting to take a more systematically critical view of our own digital lives. And then I think that involves both taking a harder look at all the technologies with which we interact and seeing them in a different light. Right, we talked about for free apps that actually, once you start thinking about them, are not for free. But I think the other thing, and you asked before about things that make us hopeful, because I think we have indeed, and also there I agree with both of you, we have these kinds of conversations that really, take another hard look at these technologies. I think there is a general question, irrespective of whether these are American companies or European companies, about the role that digital tech plays in our lives. Of course, we've had conversations about addictive design and social media platforms and these sorts of things for quite a while already, but I do feel that there is a shift where people are like, I'm not exactly sure I'm super happy with the role that screens, whether that's at the workplace or at night on the couch, play in my life. And let's have collective conversations about whether there is something that we need to change here, that we need to leave some of that behind because it's not good for us individually, it's often not good for our mental health, it's not good for how we as people can relate to each other, whether we can still look each other in the eyes and build social ties and these sorts of things. So I think there is a conversation about individual rights, there's a conversation about geopolitical power, but there's also a conversation about where we want these technologies ourselves. And for me, ultimately, these things hang together because it's about what place should they have in our lives, in our societies. Yeah. And that's, I think, it is where I feel that even with younger people, more and more, I hear them also say, "Yeah, I'm not sure I like this."
Who's recognizing this? Can I see some hands? Who is struggling with the role of technology in their lives? Maybe half of the room. Me as well. Yeah. It is a challenge, the challenge of our time, maybe. Yeah. Alexander, what else is needed beyond better rules to ensure fair and accountable AI?
I think we really need better enforcement of the rules. So, for example, in the Netherlands, we see that unfortunately the Data Protection Authority, but even the Human Rights Institute, oftentimes fail to explain the application of norms in line with international human rights standards, and or other times they simply don't have the capacity or the budget or expertise to do enough, and that is really something that should be strengthened by states if we want norms to be respected.
Yeah, interesting. Daniel, you already said it before. Should Europe invest more in our own tech?
Yes, it definitely should. And there was a moment, I think it was Bertie who mentioned this summit, this AI summit. No, I think it was you, right? I think you mentioned there we are. Yes, you mentioned the Paris AI summit, which was an incredible, 6 weeks ago. And so there was a moment where people felt, okay, maybe now this whole thing is shifting. The European Commission said that they were going to throw 200 billion euros at this. Emmanuel Macron also 100 billion. So these were significant figures. And what's happened since then is that, of course, this was all overtaken by that there is something that's yet more important, and that's our national/continental defense. And so all the money that was for a week pledged towards building our own tech now goes not to tech but to tanks, which is in many ways a little bit unfortunate. So I'm a little bit holding my breath there, because this is really a topic that I think needs to be addressed at the top political level. Many people have a vague sense, us here maybe, politicians as well, that something needs to happen. But because it's such a complex issue, unless you get from the very top, in this case of the European leadership, but also the national leadership, so both The Hague and Brussels, a real push as in we want this, we need this, then you get many fragmented small initiatives that may not amount to much. So yes, invest more, but it also really needs to stay up really high on the political agenda to be able to have a chance.
Yeah, thanks. It's time again to ask your questions. So if you're in the room, please raise your hand. And if you are watching us from online, please write down your questions and they will appear in my screen. Do you want to borrow my mic? All right, show your hands if you have a question. Around the corner, I see someone.
Thank you so much for this very elucidating and I believe very pertinent conversation. I'm still thinking about the first part of the panel when Daniel spoke about, despite how widespread and deeply integrated these technologies are in our lives, it runs first and foremost for the interest of the tech conglomerates and its profit. And when you think about how fundamentally technology has transformed every aspect of our life, from employment to bureaucracy to political organization and even just culture and interpersonal relationship like online dating, I want to ask the question, should access to safe, fair, and honest technology be considered a public good or public infrastructure, just like our roads and our healthcare?
Wow, beautiful question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, it's becoming so integrated in our lives that we cannot go without it. We're all struggling with it, right? So I think it should even maybe be a human right to have free, accessible technology.
I also totally agree, but I think you could hear how everybody here in the room held their breath when you said that. We're like, whoa, that's, on the one hand, it should be something that should be pretty natural. You think like, yeah, that's infrastructures that could help us. So where for me the bar is, and that's maybe a way to get away a little bit from this doomsday scenario that we're completely screwed, is there's a beautiful book by a woman called Shannon Valor. It's called Technology and the Virtues. Really great. She also wrote a book that's called The AI Mirror. That's also super cool. And she asks the question, I think, in a way that's a little bit more nuanced and I think can help us. She asks, what would it take to integrate technologies into our lives such that they would help us develop and grow and flourish in a way that we want to? Right? So the point is not about saying AI is good or AI is bad, but does AI help us to be more generous people? Does AI help us to be more compassionate? What would it take for an AI to help us be more courageous, to be able to admit our faults easier? These sorts of things, right? And then I think we can go through all the different domains in our lives, think about what kind of people we would want to be, what kind of characteristics we would like to see in ourselves and others, and then ask ourselves, the technology that we use, does it help us to become that person? Sometimes it does. When I can Skype with my parents in Germany, like that helps me connect to them, that's good, right? That's better than nothing. So care, yes, check. At that moment it works, and at other moments maybe it doesn't. And so that's for me is, and I think if with the kind of approach that you outlined, we would run through the different moments during our day when we interact with these technologies, we would see some things that get the thumbs up and many that get the thumbs down. And whether that comes through laws or maybe us helping each other, to use these technologies in that kind of way, I think that would really be a step forward.
Yeah, thanks. There's also a question online, and I think it adds beautifully on what we said before. The question is there a way to build a fundamental basis of human rights into AI systems, a basis that all future AI users cannot pass or ignore?
So, I think so. Tilburg University worked, I think, together with the Institute on creating this idea of non-discrimination by design. So the idea is that it's also like a human rights-based approach in which you develop these systems, these AI systems, and make sure that you have these several checks in place in different phases of the development of it. So, for instance, in the data collection phase, it emphasizes the importance of making sure that data is complete, that is balanced, that is up to date, that it's free from direct and indirect biases, and that is also crucial to determine, in case it does make a distinction, that it's that's a justified distinction. So you have to make sure that it's valid and it's lawful. And all of these things are principles that you can find in human rights treaties when it comes to equality, when it comes to justified distinctions. I think, I hope that answers the questions that...
Can I add?
Yeah.
Sorry, because of the time, but it's a pity. But there's so much to discuss about this topic. And as you can see already in the audience, there are many questions, but we still have room for one more. And to keep it fair, I was already in the middle, I was already online, I was already in this corner, but not in this corner. So I would like to give you also a chance to ask a question on the left for me, the right for you. So if you have a question. All right, one there, and then we wrap it up.
I hope it's short. Thank you for everything. I was wondering how you see, we were talking a lot about human rights, and I was wondering how you think this relates to ethics and where ethics goes further than human rights, or whether you think that human rights covers enough, so you shouldn't consider ethics anymore. Because there's a lot of data and AI ethics coming up as well, and I don't know how you see that relate to your own work.
Yeah. Because I interrupted you, you can start first if you like.
I think ethics is great, but I think that many ethical questions and dilemmas questions that are posed by ethicists many times have already been discussed and formalized into treaties. And so if you ask me, for example, in terms of non-discrimination or biased data, often we already have tools at our disposal, and we don't need like lengthy philosophical discussions. But probably there are also cases where it's totally fine to ask yourself, even if this is legally admissible, is this something that we should want?
One more expert who wants to add on that, and then our colleague walks already to this corner in the audience. So, if someone wants to add on that, or do you agree?
I'll also try to keep it short. I think there's yet another layer above this, which is why sometimes I feel that part of this AI ethics discussion cuts us a little bit too short. Ethics is about whether something, for me, like in very simple, whether something is good or bad. But I think there are also many moments where AI can be used in a way that's good for you but bad for me, or bad for you and good for me. I'm the boss, you're the employee, and the question is, if I use AI in my company, will I reap the fruits and benefits of that or you? And there's many discussions, I think, in our society that we should be having about, okay, who benefits, who doesn't, and that's slightly different than, you know, is something good for everybody or not good for everybody? And so there is the fundamental rights issue. There is, you know, some of these ethical dilemmas that Alex mentioned, but I think there's also simply political discussions. If we, on the whole, get richer, well, who gets how much of that pie? And that conversation, I think, is also one that shouldn't be forgotten.
Yeah, it's all connected, and that makes it so complicated. There's a question here. You already have the mic. Who are you? What's your question?
Hi, hello. I'm Jens. Thank you so much for your contributions, all of you. Yeah, so we've talked about a lot of different bodies tonight. So like the kind of the obligations of the public, of the governments, NGOs, private organizations. But I think the one kind of like organ we're missing here is academia. And I'm a researcher myself. I research large language models and on bias. And even I like kind of just throughout my normal days, but also when I go to these talks, I feel quite powerless, even as an academic. So I was kind of wondering what your view on that is. And maybe that's a question for Daniel, maybe specifically, but in general.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you came into academia thinking that we were powerful. So sorry if you're one illusion poorer. Like if we're really lucky, we get to sit on this stage for 90 minutes, but that's about it. But no, I think there is a role. And that comes specifically to the point when people like you who become the technical experts in this field, when they are educated, when they learn their skills, to what degree are the conversations that we're having here tonight part of that curriculum? And there I feel, I mean, you know, of course, a lot better what you do and what happens in your environment, so I'm semi-speculating here, but what I hear from colleagues who work, say, for example, here at the UvA, at the Science Park, FNWI, that these conversations that we have right now, that they are not, as per standard, included in what students or maybe even master's students or PhD students learn. And there, at least, I feel, you know, there is really a mountain to climb and a world to win to say, how can we use, as it were, so like, you know, all parts of our brain, if that makes sense, when we design these technologies. You know, they need a lot of technical expertise, but of course they also require responsibilities from the people who develop them. And there I feel we're doing not as good collectively as a university as we should.
Yeah, thanks. We're going to wrap this up. We do that with our partners. Can I welcome to stage? Give them an applause. FemData again. Yeah, we discussed many parts of the conversation. What do you find the most inspiring that you hear tonight?
I think for us, we need to move to Signal. I think that's an important one.
Practical advice.
Yeah, our like group chat. Other than that, I think to make that a little bit broader, the homegrown technology. I think the discussions on how it can move people to those spaces, I think, is a really interesting one. And then I'm also now thinking of like different research ideas that I can do. So that's a big one that I can bring home with me personally.
Cool. As I mentioned, on the 14th, we will zoom in more about building and shaping this future of AI together. Can you invite the people and tell them a little bit more?
Yeah, so in the next session, we're going to, essentially we're going to stay on the political topic, as we have already started talking about today. But there we're going to hopefully focus a little bit more on, for instance, grassroots initiatives and what citizens can do themselves to get more involved. So we're going to take what we started with today and just discuss that further from a slightly different angle. Yeah.
Cool, and you're all invited, so save the date. What's your takeaway, your core message that you want to give to our audience tonight?
Yeah, honestly, I thought there was so much interesting material that was discussed today. So I was also sitting here and was just like, oh God, what do I find the most interesting? I do agree with Myrte that I'm also quite fascinated by the idea of having more tech within Europe. So in my case, well, I think it would be very, very interesting to see how we can make that work with medical technology, so with the medical apps that a lot of people are currently using, because I think that that's very, very prevalent, and especially when we start working with patients, or for instance, when we have menstruation apps, we very quickly start working with groups that are inherently very vulnerable. So I think that's a really interesting idea, especially for that sector. And I was also really quite fascinated by the point when Bertie talked about the Meta case and the counter argument that Meta brought about. Like, okay, but these people do have a higher probability of like being into this particular ad. And I'm like, that is such a surface level reply that I was generally very surprised that this is the argument that was brought about by such a big tech company, because I was like, okay, don't they have anything better to offer as a counter argument? So I also thought that was quite interesting. But as I said, there was so much tonight that I've found fascinating that I found it really hard to choose.
Let's try to summarize with our speakers. What's the core message that each of you wants to give home with our audience? Who want to start?
Okay, so I would like to end on a maybe more hopeful note again, that it might seem like, you know, there's this big tech, this big or group of white men trying to control our lives, but there's a reason why we're all sitting here, and there are still more people being concerned about this. And well, for instance, when our win happened, I was very encouraged, and I became a bit more hopeful that, you know, change can happen. It might be a bit slow. It might be sometimes more difficult than we hope, but hopefully there will be some change. And the idea of all of us here together concerned is giving me a bit more hope that change is going to come. So hopefully you can all end the evening a bit more on a positive note, and be a bit more encouraged when you go home and think about everything we discussed.
Thanks. Daniel?
Yeah, so I'm super inspired by the work that Alex and Bertie do, because like that's not normally part of my orbit. So that's like the making a fist from the bottom, collectively pushing against. I also think that it's super cool, Myrte and Paulina, that you organize something like this. I think that's also super inspiring that you take the time next to the research work that you do at the university to say, but we want to do this, and you go out and simply do it. I think that's pretty awesome. And when it comes to sort of like the message to take, I think we need to flip a switch. And so far, like that hasn't quite happened. Yes, it is it is a fight that needs to be fought here. And it's not just some minor fiddling. I think we really need to change tracks here, but at the same time also seeing it in more and more clarity by also seeing what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic also gives me sort of like a little bit of courage and steels my nerves to say, okay, let's do it. Yes, we're out of this very pleasant comfort zone, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that is an opportunity also to switch to something that's really much more worth having, and I look forward to fighting that fight.
Wow, thanks.
I was just reflecting on the many questions that there were about like how can we use this technology in a safe way, and that just triggered in me what I often say is that, you know, for many questions we don't need technology at all, like for selecting people for controls to check if they are paying their taxes. You know, you can do that in a randomized way. By definition, you do not discriminate anyone, but the discourse around AI and technology and that it will solve all the problems of our time is so strong that it's so difficult to be critical about that. So that's one thing I just wanted to remark. And the other one is, even I have said it rights already. Become a member, make donations, not necessarily to Amnesty. There are many organizations in the civic space that, do a lot of good work to uphold our rights. And right now, civic space is under huge pressure. So, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. To wrap down this evening, I want to have a big, big, big applause for our 3 speakers. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. And also a big applause for our partners, FemData. Thank you so much. Yeah. And maybe the biggest applause, and I think there's hope in that as well, for yourself to connect with each other and to spread the word. So an applause for yourself and also for the people online. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. As you mentioned, maybe the programs at Pakhuis de Zwijger are for free, and to keep it that way, we rely on donations. So please, if you can miss anything, make a small donation, and the QR code is on the screen right now. So it will be really valuable to host more evenings, about themes like this. For now, I hope to see you all at the bar to discuss a little bit more with each other and maybe give each other a little bit more hope. My name is Arike van Lieren. It was a pleasure to be your host of today, and I wish you all well home. Nice evening. Thank you.